it can happen to anyone. I think that it is mandatory that people become aware and stop looking the other way, because it happens to everyone. I would hear sometimes people say, oh, I'm going to work, and I would wonder, these young girls, are they going to work the way I know what going to work means? Are they going to sell their bodies for a price? Girls between 11 and 14 are the ones that are often forced into the business. And when I call it the business, it's because I'm a survivor of trafficking. And so when you live in the world of prostitution and sex trafficking, stripping, it's just called the business.
Sex traffickers target people. They know who they're looking for. They know to look for vulnerable people.
Boys and girls get sexually abused. Boys and girls become homeless or are on the run. Boys and girls are at risk. CSEC is where a child or a youth is being sexually exploited.
There's several reasons why sex trafficking is so prolific in the Portland area. The primary reason is that the I-5 corridor connects every major city along the West Coast.
I think that the wide homeless population of youth is number one. Number two would be usually in the streets or within what we call the game. There's a code, there's certain things that you do, there's certain things that you don't do. They don't have that out here, and that's scary. Classism plays a big role in the sex trade. One of the greatest buyers and the biggest industry of sex trade amongst youth and adults is within corporations and businesses.
I started at the tender age of 13, right before I turned 14. I was sex trafficked. My dad had multiple sclerosis, and when he got sick, I didn't know how to deal with that. And I started running away and being defiant. A young man that I thought I could trust, he eventually turned me out.
So the way I got in was that I was boyfriended in. It's a term that you don't really hear a lot of, but what happens is that somebody's kind to you and they're nice and they're fun and they're amazing and charismatic, and you just think the world of them. The guy's really nice, he sweet talks you, it's a honeymoon at first.
My experience was I thought that I was in love with the person.
And then things change.
It was all manipulation. It was all a part of the grooming phase, to where he makes me think, that's me and him against the world. I can't survive without him, because he was buying me things and had a nice car and dressed nice. And I was young, I was 13, he was 27.
You start doing things that you wouldn't normally do, and then pretty soon you don't have a choice about what you're doing. You're like thinking that you're going on a vacation, you're going out of town, and next thing you know, you're not ever returning.
I went to San Francisco and then on to Hawaii and other different states.
You have no contact with family or parents, you have no friends, you have no one outside this very small setting to go to or turn to. You have no money, you have no resources, and you have no choices. Sometimes it'll go from hot to cold or cold to hot, like fast.
He went from Mr. Nice Guy to the person he really was.
So imagine yourself in a situation where you meet somebody, he's wonderful, you go out of town, and then you wake up and he tells you, this is what we're gonna do because we need some money, and you cannot call home. If you do, I'll kill your parents.
I was always taught whatever you do to be good at it. So when I was in that lifestyle, it was like I wanted to be the best in that lifestyle.
And so when you go home and you take a beating because you didn't show up with enough money, you think, oh, well, it's my fault. So if I make more money, it'll be different. Or if I just do this better, it'll be different. But no matter how much better you are, no matter how much money you make, there's always violence.
A youth is homeless or LGBTQ identified, and or that are currently prostituting or involved in CSEC, that is being exploited. Foster homes don't want youth like that, and they have a file and a record of, so the placement, or when they go into placement, they're not identifying in the homes culturally, so then they run, and it's just a big mess, but they end up becoming at risk even higher.
The way that you identified somebody as an undercover officer was to touch on them. So I had touched on this guy, and Of course, he was posing that he was a customer and that he wanted to buy sex. And later on, about 5 minutes later, he came back around the block and arrested me and charged me not with prostitution, he charged me with sexual battery. It meant that I had to register as a sex offender. It meant that I couldn't get a job. It meant that I was unemployable. It meant that every month on my birthday, if I moved, every term I went to college, that I would have to show up and register and have to say, like, I'm here to register as a sex offender.
If you don't have no money, you got to figure out a way to feed yourself and take care of yourself. And so the streets itself become addicting.
I made a lot of money being trafficked. Although I didn't have access to the money, he kept all the money, but we lived very comfortably. To walk away from the money is really hard for girls sometimes. They're like, what am I going to do, walk away from this and go work for McDonald's?
When I started to have kids, my oldest daughter, she's 29, and I knew that I wanted to get out that lifestyle, but I was, the money kept me in there. And so when I had my youngest daughter in '93, I started to slowly but surely fade away from that lifestyle. But it was a hard transition because my self-esteem was at an all-time low. I was broken, so I had to start the healing process. I started my own organization. It's called YAYA. It stands for Youth and Young Adults that have been involved in sex trafficking or trying to get out.
So I recently just started a blog. It's called Surviving Prostitution on Tumblr, where I am telling my story.
If I could plant a seed, and I may not see it grow, but later on it'll blossom to keep as many individuals that I can save. It's to start to help them to heal by building up their self-esteem and loving on them and letting them know that they can make it through, because I made it through.
My hope for the future is that the sex industry, it be looked at through a lens of public health. The whole city gets involved when we look at it as a public health issue. When we serve people that have been involved in the sex industry, that we create community health workers, people that have lived experience, to be able to relate to them and to walk them through a healing process.
I hope that we have a world where girls and children and women can be free from human slavery.
Put me on the train, send me back my home. Couldn't live without you when I tried to roam. Put me by the windows, let me see outside. Look at all the places where all my family died, where all my family died, where all my family died, where all my family died. Leave me by the churchyard, leave me on my own. The storm will come and take me back to my old